As I look out at you fellas, I feel sure that there are a number of you who, like me, in your young days growing up, really enjoyed getting out in a park and playing touch football or baseball or whatever, and you really enjoyed it. You enjoyed the competition, you enjoyed the camaraderie, and then going on into high school and college and all, maybe you were on a sports team where you enjoyed it too, and all the things that go with competing like that. And then maybe even after that, out in the business world or wherever. But unfortunately, and I certainly did as I was going through those various stages, but unfortunately our knees, our backs, our hearts, our lungs betray us at some point. And things have to drop off that we love doing, including things like whether it's sports or other competitive activities. And I know personally I've experienced that I had to stop competitive distance running, which I always loved. And when COVID hit, I had to stop playing softball, senior league softball. And one thing after another, and I've stopped trying lawsuits, which certainly is a competitive activity, not a contact sport, but it's a competitive activity. And things like that, one by one dropping off. And so our last racehorse. So having that end created one or more voids in my life. I really felt like I was missing out on something. And I got to tell you, bingo at PBN doesn't fill the need. And so I stumbled upon, and I say stumbled upon, one of my grandsons in the 8th grade at the time, 4 years ago, mentioned to me fantasy football. And it sounded kind of interesting. So we formed the Bryant Family League, and we've been doing it the last 4 years. And it is a lot of fun. And now, you also, and it's appropriate for any age, I would say from 12 to really no upper limit. Men and women. The first year, one of my grandsons got really caught up in it and got very, very good. And he won the playoffs in our league, even though I was ahead at the end of the regular season. But he won in the playoffs. And he made a 3D championship ring for himself and a championship trophy. So you got to worry a little bit about humility too, as you involve them in this kind of thing. And then this last year, one of my granddaughters, who's a very bright young lady, she got caught up in it, and she won it. She won it in the playoffs. But we've had a lot of fun in the family doing that. So let me describe to you what this fantasy football is. Feel free at any time to ask a question or save it to the end. Makes no difference to me. ESPN is the host of fantasy football. ESPN is owned 72% by Walt Disney via ABC. But despite that, doing fantasy football is free. You don't have to pay any streaming fee to Walt Disney or anything like that. It's free. Also, I should mention up front, I'm sure, that it doesn't involve gambling in any way. FanDuel and DraftKings and Underdog and all those gambling entities have nothing to do with this. Point spread has nothing to do with this. ESPN also has fantasy hockey, fantasy basketball, fantasy baseball, and fantasy WNBA, the women's professional. Now, all of this is professional football and other activities. No college involvement at all. But that's the basics of it, and there are far more people doing fantasy football than all the other fantasy things put together. Before I get into this, I'm going to mention two real oddities that are going to happen for the first time this year, so that you can, in a conversation at dinner sometime, maybe if you want to show how knowledgeable you are. September 9 this year will be the first NFL game. And that's game's going to be Seattle hosting somebody, which will be announced tonight. Maybe it'll be New England replaying the Super Bowl. But that's interesting because that's a Wednesday night. And to my recollection, the NFL has never had a game on Wednesday night before. The creep keeps going. There are now games on Black Friday, 3 games this year on Christmas Day, It's really spreading. And then the second day, it's the second thing I'll mention to you is a couple of days after that first game, there's going to be the first game which has been played on 2 days. And here's how I get to say that. The game is in Melbourne, Australia at 10:35 in the morning. Back here in the good old US of A, it's still 8:35 Thursday night, the night before that Friday game over there, where the Rams and the 49ers are going to be duking it out in a different, not just a different time zone, but a different day technically. So I just mentioned that for you. Well, how do you go about, if you want to get involved in this, how do you go about starting out? There are really 2 ways to do it. You can go out and find some family members or friends or whatever, and you start a league of teams, and the teams are all the individual people that are in there. Or, if you don't have any friends or family that want to do this, you can ask ESPN to put you in a league. And they'll put you in with Louie, Bubba, and Fat Boy, and you can be in a bunch of people that you don't really know, but maybe you can get to know them. So those are the 2 different ways you can get into it. Now, when you come in, you need to have a person in your league who is kind of a manager, who communicates with ESPN, and there are a few little responsibilities. They are not a big deal. People should not run the other direction if somebody asks you, would you please be our league manager? It's really not onerous. But you got to have somebody designated like that. Now, how does it work on, and that person communicates in setting up some things in the league. How do you go about getting players? There are 2 different ways you get players for your team. ESP gives you the option of having kind of an auction. They give you a hypothetical $200 for each person in your league. And then you bid on players, and whoever's the highest bidder gets that player. But obviously, if you're spending a whole bunch of money on Christian McCaffrey from San Francisco, you're not going to have so much left for the tight end that you pick up. So you have to be smart. And one of the strategies, I've never done it this way with the auction, but one strategy is, as you go through and each of the participants nominate somebody, okay, now let's bid, blah, 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 blah. Nominate somebody you couldn't care less about, but get other people to burn up their money on that person that you think is still, his injury still is going to affect him. So there's strategies in there. But the other way is to do, as I've always done the last 4 years of the league that we have, which is to have a draft. It's not the same exactly as the draft that the NFL does. You know how the NFL operates each year. The team with the worst record the year before gets the first draft pick, second worst record gets second, all the way down to the 32 teams, and the team that won the Super Bowl is the last 32. And then rounds 2 through 7, you go back up, and that worst record team gets the first pick in round 2, round 3, and so forth. It's different in fantasy football. It's better, it's fairer, and here's why. We have what's called a snake draft. And what that is first round, you go from 1 to 10, and if you're just starting out, somewhere or another you got to flip coins or draw straws or whatever to decide who's going to be 1 through 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But once you start through the draft, you start out and go down to 10, but then instead of going back up to 1, you turn right around and number 10 gets number 11. 9 gets 9 and 12. And it's, as you can see, it's fair instead of letting one team have the first shot every single round. Now in fantasy football, there are 17 rounds that you go through. Why 17? Well, you're going to wind up with 9 starters and 8 on your bench. You have a grand total of 17, I would say players, except in the mix, they're all offensive players, except you're going to have a defense, where it's a D/ST, defense plus special teams. And you get each week you're going to have one of those starting. Here's what the starters are in the 9 starting slots. There's 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, a place kicker, a defense, special teams, and 1 spot that's called flex. You can put in flex another tight end, another wide receiver, another running back. You cannot put in another quarterback, but you can put in any of the other positions. Now, after as you're going through the draft and selecting your people, there are all kinds of different strategies that you can use. But you need to study ahead of time and really get an understanding of things. Well, and there's another thing you can do. There are mock drafts that ESP puts on. And fellas, you're not going to believe this. Here we are in May, right? The season doesn't start until September 9, right? There are people in our country, in our county probably, who are already doing mock drafts. And every day, if you go on ESPN, you can do it tonight and do a mock draft. And of course, if you know you're going to be number 8 out of 10 in your league, then you ought to get a mock draft where you can be number 8 and kind of see how it plays out. It's not going to be the same as when you really draft it ultimately, but at least you can kind of get a feel for it. And it's really a good test because in the mock drafts, they only have 30 seconds between choices. And so it moves along fast. In most real drafts, in your league, the league I'm in has 1 minute and 90 seconds between them. So you can get up and go get a sandwich and come back sometimes. But sometimes it moves rapidly and people know what they want. They put in their choice and it flashes on there. You are 7 selections away, but it can quickly go 6, 5, 4. And before you know it, it's down to you. You're on and you've got to pick somebody. But people do mock drafts ahead of time, and that can be helpful. I'm going to show you something now. You can't read this. I know you can't read. If you can, you don't belong in the old folks home. But I will say to you, this is a list of 300, and it's a mixture of players, offensive players, and a whole bunch of defenses going down to, the last one is Cowboys defense. This is from last year. This is August of last year. This is just before the draft last year. And you see, I made a few marks and different things here. This is put together by a dozen experts for ESPN. They use their great wisdom to rank all the players. And then also, you'll see a little, you can't really see it, but dollars out there saying if you're doing the thing with the bidding with dollars, how much they think that guy's worth. Forget that. Do it with the draft. Don't do the dollar stuff. Then you also see a number here. This is the week that player has a bye. I'm going to talk about buys in a little bit. But here they're all listed up. This is 300. But there are many more players, at least 300 more, that you can select. You aren't limited to this list, but this, they call it a cheat sheet up there. Really, everybody uses this. You can use it, and it's very helpful. And you can kind of figure where, and they revise this leading up to the real start of the season. They revise this every 3 or 4 days because injuries happen. And all kinds of things, people get traded, whatever it is. So this gets revised constantly, but this is something that you can, a tool that you can use during the draft. Let me hit the next one, please. This is something that I use, and I'm sure other people have other ways of doing things. But like I say, there are 17 rounds. See, 4, 8, 12, 16, 17. Ahead of the draft, I try to figure out, and I can look and see, let's say I was number 8, and I put what my number is, when I'm going to get to number 8, 13, 28, 33, and so forth. And I put down whom I think will likely be available, or maybe if I'm lucky, slips down a little bit and might be available, but whom I really like, and kind of rank them in the order of what I would want to get. And then, of course, though, as the day wears on with the draft, you get surprises. For example, most of the real, quote, experts say that you shouldn't start drafting quarterbacks until round 3 or 4 or even 5. But if you're in the league with people who just love Dak or Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson or any of those, and on round 1 or round 2 jumps in and grabs that guy, it might start a run on quarterbacks. And you don't want to be sitting there twiddling your thumbs in round 5 and the top 7 or 8 quarterbacks are gone. So you have to be nimble. But you go through and kind of plan, get your overall game plan, but be flexible, be nimble. So what if I don't have a quarterback? I had that here at 88. Bo Nix is maybe somebody I would consider if it gets that deep into it, if I'm in round 9 and I still don't have a quarterback. Now, one thing that's also important as you're doing this is rookies. You can get some feedback. There are experts that go on and give an hour-long program a couple of times a week. You can get information about rookies coming into the league, and you can listen to that and weigh it as you think best. But I have found that once you start getting in here, picking up a couple of the top rookies is really a pretty good thing to do. I've had real good luck with tight ends the last few years. So think about all of that. Now, there's an option that they give you that my league team has done this last year, which is get rid of the place kicker and have another flex position. Here's the reasoning, rationale on that, if you want to consider it. It is really so much luck on who among the place kickers gets a lot of points. Let's say Kansas City is playing Tennessee Titans, and during the game, Kansas City wins 28-6. Tennessee doesn't get inside the red zone. Tennessee kicks 2 field goals, whoopee, but Kansas City marches in every time it virtually goes down there. Well, the place kicker for Kansas City kicks all 4 extra points and gets 4 points, fantasy points. Whereas the place kicker for the Titans kicks the 2 field goals from 40 yards and from 45 yards and winds up with 7 points instead of 4 points. It's crazy, isn't it? And so that's an option you can do if you want to. Another thing I'll mention is one of my number 1 pet peeve. Here's what it is. Overtime counts in the eyes of ESPN. I think that is grossly unfair. If I'm going head-to-head with a competitor and we come up to the end of the game and I'm ahead by 2 points, that should be the end of it, instead of my competitor who just happens to have somebody on a team who gets to play another up to 10 minutes in there and get more points. And it can really make a difference because in many of the contests, the head-to-head contests, it's decided by 1 or 2 points or even fractions of a point. I've had a game every year that was decided by 1/10 of a point or 2/10 of a point or even the hundreds. It gets down to the hundreds. So I'm just mentioning a pet peeve that I have. Now, when I say there's a time between the picks that you're going through with, if you know you've got somebody, the screen in front of you scrolls along with these names, and as somebody's selected me, it's no longer on the screen that ESPN provides. But there are always 7 or 8 names. The next one's coming up that are available right there. But you can pick somebody who's way far on down, either typing in the person's name and say, me, I take that one, or scroll fast and get on down to the number where you know that person is. So you have free reign to get any of the people at any time that you want to. I'm going to walk through a week in the life of fantasy football. And every day is important, and here's why. Forget about this crazy Wednesday, Thursday, Friday start the season. Usually, of course, we know that on Thursday is the first game of the football week. And on Thursday night, you may not have anybody on either one of the teams, but if the competitor you're going against that week has somebody, you're going to have some interest in it. And maybe just generally you have some interest in it. But there's a game Thursday night. Once there's a kickoff in that Thursday night game, all of the players on both teams are basically frozen. If they're on a team, fine. If they're not, if they're a free agent, not yet selected, you can't pick them up. And it's the same way as you move through the rest of the week. Okay, there's the Thursday night game. Friday, let's assume there's no game. Then on Saturday, usually not for the first number of weeks of the season, there aren't any games. But on Sunday, the first 10 or 11 games, weeks of the season, there is an overseas game, most of them in Europe. So at 8:30 in the morning, there is a kickoff in London or in Madrid or wherever it is. So depending on how addicted you are to all this, you may be up watching some of that and say, church manana, I'll go some other time. But there's a game somewhere going on there, and your player, you may have some players involved in that game, so of course you're interested in it. And same thing happens. As soon as there's a kickoff, things get frozen for those teams. As you know, the league has rules about keeping people apprised of injury situations. And they're supposed to on Saturday for the Sunday games, let you know things, and then finally 90 minutes before kickoff is kind of supposed to be the final where they tell you, is Joe playing or not this week? And sometimes they'll still say game time decision, we're going to see how he warms up or whatever, but they're really supposed to be honest, and the teams can get heavily fined if they don't deal with that properly. Then we move on through the Sunday afternoon games, Sunday night games, and move over to Monday. But as that goes by, all the players that are free agents that are on these teams that have played and gone on, they're still frozen. You can't pick them up. You can't if you want a free agent. And there are plenty of free agents throughout the year who are not on the team. Once you get through with the last game on Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday are very important for this reason. You look and you see, two of my guys who were on the bench are just awful. And they got demoted, obviously demoted on that or whatever. I want to get rid of them. You can look over at all of the free agents. And one of those free agents who played on Thursday was lights out good. Now, is that just a one-off thing, or is that person really going to be a wide receiver who gets targeted 11 times like last Thursday? It's using your judgment. But you decide on Tuesday what free agents I want to pick up and whom I'm going to drop, because every time you bring one in, you got to drop one out and make space for it. Now, you may not be the only buzzard that's out there looking for something like that. The competitors in your league will also be watching it. So how do you decide who, if two people both want it, how do you decide who gets it? Well, there are a couple of ways to do that, but the preferable way, I think, is whoever is doing worst in the standings at that point. If you're a team that's 0-4 in last place, you get priority one time over somebody else who is 4-0 or 3-1 in there. So, but the other person may not want that, or you may be able to grab one. But the way it works is you type in and put in this order. Here are the free agents I want: Joe, Jim, Ralph, and the ones and who you would drop out so he can take that place. You can put the same person to be dropped out for 2 or 3 ones if you want to. You say, if I can get Jim, that's great. If I can't, I want Joe, but the only person I'm willing to drop out is still the guy I was going to drop out on the first one. ESPN, if you've already dropped somebody out, will nullify the second time you say drop that person out. So that's part of the strategy as you're going through all of this. At around 2:30 to 3 o'clock, early bird AM on Wednesday, the big machines, now AI, I guess, over in New York City say, that is the deadline. If you haven't put in your request for free agent, it's too bad. And they decide who has the priority and who's going to get these additional people. And so, I'll admit, every now and then I'll get up at 3 o'clock. Try not to wake up soon. Try on in and see, did I get Pedro? Did I get Pedro? And you know, hey, and I go back and get a good night's sleep. But the more, it's like anything else, the more you put into it, the better you'll do. Christian McCaffrey, I'll give you an example. Christian McCaffrey, top running back for San Francisco for many years, but kind of injury prone, at least for a couple of years he was. But there's what's called handcuffs. Here's what it is. Let's say that there's a star player that you may have on your team or you may not have on your team, but the second stringer is really good, but you know there's a decent chance the first one is going to go pull up lane sometime. And put the guy who really isn't getting much playing time on your bench. And then if McCaffrey gets hurt and is out, Mason, who's a really good running back, you got him to step in. And I did that one year. I had Mason, McCaffrey got hurt, but then I picked up the third stringer, Guerrero, too. And Mason got hurt, and I got Guerrero. Nobody else was getting it. So it's a strategy, and it's called handcuffs because if you have a starter that's really important to you, it's kind of insurance, if something bad happens to you. Now, there are 3 symbols that ESP uses to help you figure out a lot of things. ESP has a ton of information for you. If a player has an injury by Thursday or Friday, and the coach says, well, we kind of think he'll play, but it's questionable. There's a Q after his name until that gets cleared up. If the player they think really isn't going to make it, it's D for doubtful. If the player for sure isn't going to play this week, it's O for out. And you really, as you're leading up to the Sunday games, you really need to kind of keep up with that. Because you can be surprised. Somebody who didn't even have a Q all at once has an O. I was counting on that running back. And you need to scramble and get somebody off of your bench. There, in addition to your bench, there is also an IR spot, injured reserve. If you have a player that gets hurt, is going to be out 4 games or more, you can put that player on injured reserve and then pull in a free agent and stick that free agent in there. Now, when your injured player comes off of injured reserve, you're going to have to dump somebody, and it can be anybody, off to make the spot for that player. So that's another thing you can monitor. But always also monitor what the other teams are doing, because they may give up on a guy who's injured, but you think, I think he'll come back pretty soon. And boy, he's so good, and I'm hurting for running backs. I'm willing to put him on the bench and wait a few weeks, and then maybe I got what cures what ails me. And so that's something you can do. Let's talk about injuries and suspensions. That's the bane of your life doing fantasy football, because injuries happen so much and all, but also suspensions. You all know about Rashid Rice, who went to SMU and had the fun one even in the wee hours driving down Central Expressway with one of his buddies and 2 rented expensive cars going 115 miles an hour. What could go wrong with that? There was a big crash, people hurt, and one of the issues then isn't just the criminal liability or the civil liability for damages. Royce West got Rice through that pretty well. But the league itself may suspend somebody, and they suspended him for 6 games. So when you're doing your drafting, you need to know about things like that. And you may think, well, but he's the top wide receiver for Kansas City. I'll take the hit on that, and I'll just put him on the bench for a while. Well, okay. And now he's had another problem with choking a woman. And so the penalties for that are probably steep, shall we say. At least it should be as high as having dog fights like Vic had way back when. So you just kind of have to keep up with the rap sheet and everything else as you're going through this if you want to do it right. A couple other things that I'll mention is, and I didn't really go into detail on when you get started out with your teams, ESPN, and you need an even number of teams, 8, 10, 12, 14. I think 10 or 12 is kind of the sweet spot in there. But you need an even number of teams because there are bye weeks. You need an even number of teams because every week you want to be playing against somebody and not have a team that doesn't play. There are 13 weeks to the fantasy football regular season, 13 weeks. At the end of 13 weeks, ESPN looks and says, who are the top 4 teams, one lost record, and those 4 go into the playoffs to be the champion. Everybody else has playoffs for 5th place and 7th place and blah, 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 blah. But really the core of it is trying to get into the top 4 teams during the 13 regular season games. Now, you might say, well, if you have a league of 10, in the 13 games, you have to play a few teams more than once. Yes, you do. And so there's a little luck involved in that. If there's a weaker team and you get to play that team twice, that's a little bit of advantage. ESPN, for some reason that's always escapes me, divides the league into 2 divisions. I don't know why they want to do that. They even have a thing they say home team. That doesn't count for anything really. But the only impact that has, let's say you have 10 teams, 5 in each division. When they get down to figuring out who the 4 teams are, 3 teams with the best record, but if they're all in this division and the 4th team in that division has the same record, 1 loss record, as the top team over here, the leader in the division automatically gets the 4th spot. Go figure. But anyway, that's the way ESPN does all of that. All right, how do players score points for you to help you win each week? If you're a running back, you get a point for every 10 yards you run in fractions. So if you go run for 5 yards, you get half a point. If you score a touchdown as a running back, it's 6 more points. If you fumble, it's a minus. And the other team gets the fumble, you lose 2 points. If you run and lose 4 yards, it's a minus 0.4 for that. So but also, running backs sometimes catch swing passes. If a running back goes out for a pass, maybe blocks and then releases and goes out and catches a pass, that's a point. Plus the number of yards, 1 point for each 10 yards of catching a pass. For the wide receivers, of course, they're mostly, hopefully, catching passes. So it's the same thing for them. They 1 point for each 10 yards for catches they get. A catch is 1 point. Just catching it if it's for no yardage is 1 point for the wide receivers as well as running backs. And sometimes it's interesting because you have what are called jet sweeps where wide receivers run. If they run in front of the quarterback, it's a little shovel forward, that counts as a pass. That's a point right there, no matter what else is going to happen. If the jet sweep runner runs behind the quarterback, it's a lateral, it's a run. You don't get the point for catching the pass. And as it plays out in the points accumulate. For the quarterbacks, the quarterback gets 0.4 The quarterback, for every 25 yards, gets .4. He gets a point for that. In other words, it's not 1 point for 10 yards. It's .4 for 10 yards. And the quarterback can be a runner. Push. You know, the quarterback can be a runner. And if the quarterback runs, then you get the appropriate points for how far you run, 1 yard, 2 yards, whatever it is. And 6 points if you bust into the end zone. The tight ends score the same way. If they catch a pass, it's 1 point, plus they get credit for the yardage. And if they score a touchdown, 6 points. Anybody scores a touchdown gets 6 points.
But who keeps track of all these points?
As your ESPN.
Will they do it for you?
ESPN, as the game progresses, you can jump up every 10 minutes and run it and see how many points your opponent has and how many points you have. And so no, that is constantly being monitored, and it's on your computer. You can see that.
Thank you.
Sure. No, please jump in with questions. To me, things that have become obvious after 4 years are not so obvious. Really. And as you're going through, you have to decide in your, you have the option in flex. Are you better off putting in a third wide receiver? You can't put in a quarterback, but you can put in a third wide receiver, a third running back, or a tight end. Tight ends usually don't generate quite as many points as wide receivers and running backs do. But you just got to figure out on your team what's one of the strengths.
Can you swap players during the game?
As soon as the kickoff happens, you are frozen on the players you have there. You can't put any players in, you can't drop any players out, and you get such a gut-wrenching feeling when on the fourth play. I had one last year. Kittle was my tight end for San Francisco. He was lights out good first half of the first part of the first quarter. He had racked up 12 points halfway through the first quarter and went down with an injury. And that just, you know.
And you can't put anybody in.
You can't put anybody in. You're stuck with it the rest of the game.
Did you say you were limited to 2 wide receivers?
That you have to have 2 wide receivers. You can have a third wide receiver in your flex. If you've dropped out the place kicker, you can have 4 wide receivers. And on your overall team, I should mention this, there are limits in the number of quarterbacks you can have. You can have 3 quarterbacks. You can have 3 tight ends. You can have 5 running backs. You can have 5 wide receivers. You can have 3 defense/special teams on your overall team, including on the bench.
Is it a successful strategy to load up on wide receivers because they generate more points?
Wide receivers, to me, are cotton candy. And I have a hard time resisting the first few rounds. When it gets down, I still haven't picked a running back. But, oh, look at the wide receiver that's sitting there in round 4. I gotta be. It's really tough. But now sometimes it works out great because this last year, got down to round 4 and I had my fingers crossed on Jackson Smith-Njigba, the great wide receiver for Seattle, because the year before I had watched him, he never drops a pass. And the year before this last, there were 2 other really good wide receivers on Seattle with him, so they had to divide up. You know, the cake can only be divided so many ways, and he wasn't getting as many targets. But the other 2 went and signed free agent contract. So I knew he was the lead guy. He was the lead dog pulling the sled. And I got him, and he led the league as the wide receiver. Now, this year, they've already got him ranked in the first 8 instead of number 37 or whatever it was last year. And so sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong. But
Corbin, you've accumulated a lot of experience, obviously, in 4 years. Would you take over the Cowboys?
didn't you see that was the come on that Mike had? That actually, I gave that line to him. If you think you can do better than the Joneses and running the Cowboys, or blah, 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 then come to fantasy football. Let me mention a few more things that are important, I think. We talked about injuries and suspensions, but I haven't talked about the bye week. The bye week is really, really important. Now, for teams in real life, the bye week is great, isn't it? Because they get to spend time with their family or go play golf, or they get extra day off. They get to sit in the ice bucket more, or their injuries heal. It's great for a team to have a week off, right? Or spend some time with the family. But in fantasy football, bye week is a terrible week for you for 1 or 2 or 3 players. And that's why they tell you on what I showed up here, what is the bye week for the team of each of those players. And it's really important in week 14. Here is the tar pit on that. Week 14 is the first week of the playoffs. And ESPN has this quirky thing of having the first round of the playoffs is seed 1 against seed 4, 2 against 3, okay? But you play that same opponent for 2 weeks in a row. After your 13 weeks are over, then week 14 and 15, you're playing the same opponent and add together the scores for the 2 weeks to see who advances. Does 1 beat 4? Yes. Does 2 beat 3? No, 3 wins. So 3 against 1 because of the cumulative score of the prior weeks. Week 14 is the last of the bye weeks. During weeks 5 through 14, there are 2, 4, or 6 teams that have a bye. And if you have 3 players on San Francisco, they have a bye week, and you can't use any of those players that week. They're not playing. So you got to reach down your bench or go free agent, bring in somebody to fill in. So, you know, you need to know that when you pick somebody, if their bye week is week 14, you're not going to have them the first week of the playoff. You're sure you're going to be one of the top 4 teams, right? And you know you aren't going to have, and San Francisco has had a bye week 14 the last few years. So when I had Kittle, and I've had several of their wide receivers at different times, I know I'm going to be at a disadvantage the first week of the playoffs. So you can avoid those players if that's your strategy. As you're playing through the year, you have to keep all of this in mind, trying, and I guess there could be a strategy of, I don't care if all of them have a bye week the same week, a whole bunch of them. I'll get that loss out of the way, and then I have a small advantage the rest of the year, playing against people who are going to have 1 bye a week or something like that. So anyway, there's a lot of strategy involved in all that. All right, if you would show the next one, please.
Is this where you are?
Yeah, this is another thing, is you're getting ready for the draft, and you're trying to decide which defense you want, which defense, special teams you want. What I do is, and then you can put as much involvement as you want. You can either say, okay, what are the 3 or 4 best defenses? And they'll tell you, their ranking shows you that they think Denver, Houston, Seattle, so on down. And you can just take a team, stick it in, and walk away and stick with that team all the time, except for the bye week. You're going to need to put somebody else in there. What I do is quite different. They're somewhat different. I figure out what I think are the 4 or 5 best defenses, or I guess how many did I put on here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They're 7 or 8. But I want to know the first 6 or 7 weeks of the season who the opponent is for each one of them. Because Houston may have a great defense, which it did this last year. But if it's playing against Buffalo, or it's playing against somebody who has a high-powered offense, they might not do so well that week. The measurement is going to be based on how strong is your defense, but how strong is the opponent. If the opponent always racks up 30 points, then you don't want even a very good defense that week. So what I do is I went through and looked really for the whole season to see who the opponents would be for these. And then I decide, and usually I'll take 2 defenses and have one on the bench to start with, obviously. And I'll just kind of look at the first 6 or 7 or 8. And for example, here, as I was looking at Seattle, I thought the first 3 weeks are really good for Seattle, and then week 6 and week 7. So Seattle looked like a pretty good choice for a defense here, but I would have to take care of weeks. I was a little worried about how good, and you can see how wrong you can be by the end of the year. That Arizona might be okay offensively, and Tampa Bay, I thought was a better choice with what some of the other teams would play in those weeks. But anyway, you kind of decide, and so I try to come up with 2 defenses that I can use one or the other through, say, the first eight games or so. And then as the season goes on, some defenses get hurt, have players get hurt, or things happen. And you need to be able to change your mind, admit you're wrong on something, and move to something else. And so I shuffle the deck more than most people do as the week goes on. And here's something I like to do. Don't just look at the week that you're in or the next week. Look at the week after that. And if you see that a defense you like is playing the Tennessee Titans, and nobody has that defense, even if they're the 15th best defense, snatch them up and put them on your bench ahead of somebody else waking up and saying, oh, my defense has a bye this week, who do I want? Oh, I ought to get the team that's going against Tennessee. Nope, I've already got that, because I was looking ahead 2 weeks. And so anyway, this is something you can do. All right, let's move on to the next one. Okay, this is to show you, you can see how here are your starters. I know you can't see it, but these are the starters. Here's your bench. You see this little word move over here. It says move. When you decide that you want to move one of your bench players up here and move another one down, you just hit that move, and then you go down here and hit the person that you're going to switch off of that. And it gives you other information. It tells you, it'll tell you what percentage of the teams in all the other leagues have that player on their roster. If that's important to you, somebody who really popular, why not, well, you know, so you can figure out if other people are thinking the same way you are generally. And then some other information that they give you on there. Here's glossary down at the bottom. It tells you how he has been doing, how he should be ranked at this point in the season, vis-a-vis other people at his position. There's just a ton of information that they give you to the extent that you want to think through all of that.
Can you trade players with other teams?
I was about to say that. That 1 year was one of my pet peeves also. The answer is yes, with a couple of caveats. You can trade with somebody else in your league. Both of you want to do it, unless the league manager vetoes it, or 5 people who have teams get together and say veto it, or it's past a certain date in November, which is the drop dead date for trading. Now, why do you need some things like that? Let's say cousin Phil is 0-4. He says, I'm done, I'm toast. I'm sick of this, why did I get into this? But he says, my cousin over here has a good team, but he's hurt at running back, and I do have a really good running back. And so you trade a good player for a not so good player, you say, to build up a super team. You don't want to build up a super team. And so that doesn't come up too often, and hopefully it doesn't move to fisticuffs among members of the league. But does that answer your question? Yes, you can, as long as it isn't the last 3 or 4 weeks of the season, and also if it doesn't get vetoed one way or the other. Yes?
How does a defensive player score points?
Okay. here's how that works. It's defense, special teams. I'll take the easy part first. The special teams, receiving a kick, receiving a punt, and receiving a kickoff. The only way you get points out of either one of those is to run it back all the way for a touchdown, 6 points. Well, I take that back. Don't they still have the rule that if you block an extra point, pick it up and run it back all the way 2 points? Isn't that it used to be that rule? Is that in the pros too? But I'm saying that's how you get points by your special teams. Turpin maybe will give you points one time during the year, but mostly the special teams don't really help you out. Here's how the defense gets points for you. When you start every game, you start out and it'll say you have 10 points. Huh? They just kicked off, didn't they? Yes. If your defense shuts out the other team, they get 10 points. That rarely happens, right? So you start with the 10 points, and then it starts getting eroded away as they kick a field goal, score a touchdown, so it drops to 8 points, 6 points, 5 points, depending on several things. How many points the other team scores, but also the yardage. If you hold them under 200 total yards, you get so many points. You get points by a sack, 1 point if you sack the quarterback. If you intercept a pass, you get 2 points. If you intercept a pass and run it back all the way, you get 2 points for interception and 6 points for scoring the touchdown. If you recover a fumble, that's 2 points. So those are all the different ways that you can collect points as a defense. And ESPN invariably predicts that a defense will get 7 or 8 points net by the end of the game. But if you have a really good defense and it intercepts a couple of passes and blah, 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 it could easily have 15 points or 16 or 17. And that can win or lose the game for you. Did that answer, pretty much answer it? They're just the kind of things you would imagine that are good things for defenses to do. And as the game progresses, there can be really big twists and turns. I had a game one time where I thought I had won against my opponent team. My guy caught, it was Goddard, the tight end for the Eagles for many years. He caught a pass, and I had watched and I knew that I was a point and a half behind, and with time running out, last play of the game, he catches a pass, a point, and he runs about 10 yards. That's more than half a point. I've got it. When he's starting to go down, he gets hit in the head and shoulder. It was clearly a foul, but he fumbles the ball. They didn't throw a flag because he fumbled and lost the fumble, -2. And I lost. My guy got hammered, and it was grossly unfair. You see, I remember wrong. Some injustices that have been done to me. Let me see. There are a couple other things that go ahead and go to the next one. There's all kinds of information that you get. This says free agents. And at any time, you can hit the buttons and go over to free agents, and they will rank them in the way that ESPN looks at them as being the best, and how popular they are with other teams in other leagues. And you can see if you want one of these people, and then like I said to you, on Tuesday and Wednesday, you can determine. But if it gets to Thursday, and nobody has picked this player, you can pick, anybody can just reach in and automatically pick somebody up Thursday, Friday, until that player's team plays. And you have to drop somebody to do that. Okay, and you see there's a cue here by Ricky Pearsall. He's injured, so that lets you know. You better check it out. I think that's about all that really needs to be said about this. Go ahead. All right.
There you go.
Okay, player news. Lots of information comes in every day. You can imagine. But this is one of the buttons you can hit over on your team and go through and see what's happening with the Bear quarterback, what's happening with this, that, and the other. So it's just however much time you want to spend checking out things. If you're compulsive, yes, it can be a full-time deal. Let's go. I think there's one more. Another. Recent activity. What are the other people in your league doing? You can kind of monitor that, but here's a central place that you can. Every time, see, it says Bryant, a lot of Bryant's in there. And you can see what somebody did yesterday or today or, recently. Somebody dropped somebody and picked up a free agent. Somebody did this, somebody did that. You can look at any time and see recently what others have been doing. Of course, your name's going to be in there too if you've been active. I talked about the buys. And ESPN, beginning at the very beginning, after you've done your draft, ESPN immediately starts providing information as far as ranking. Let's say you have 10 people in your league. Right after the draft is over and you're kind of happy with what you've gotten, they will rank the teams in your year in their view, predicting where at the end of the game who's going to come out on top and who's going to be last. I have never been put higher than 7th in ESPN's eyes, but that's all right. I've worked my way up, and by the end of the regular season, about half the time in first place or at least in second or third, because the most fun in this thing is making your own decisions. And if you think you have an insight in your judgment about a new quarterback that just come in, is the Bear quarterback going to be good or is he going to belly flop? Well, what is going to go on? Oh, here's a quarterback that's a running quarterback too, and that's worth a whole lot. Go ahead and throw yourself into it and make some decisions. You don't just go by ESPN. They can make mistakes too. Their experts do make mistakes. So anyway, let's see. I think this is one more. Yeah, this is okay. This will just show a typical week. This is Dallas quarter Zacks. I have a son-in-law named Zach, so it's quarter Zacks. Haha. And this is his team, and this week he's going against. And here is JV over here. Okay, it's showing his team with the projected points of what ESPN said you should expect, adding up to 120 points. It's what ESPN says in the normal course of things, you'll wind up with 120 points. The other team over here, it shows if everything goes according to Hoyle, 123 points. It's got cut off a little bit. So you can see before your big match that week how you shape up under the predictions against the other team. And then down here the benches, and it shows how much they project the points would be used if you move this person from the bench up there. But again, you use your judgment. But there's a whole lot of information. And a lot of, this is a glossary down here that explains some things. That's the last one. Is there another? Yeah. Back up. We don't need, that's not part of it. You rascal, you. You rascal, you. Okay, any other questions that anybody has? Oh, and I'll tell you, and this shows how you can really get carried away with this. I also have a list of which teams have opened and closed stadiums. So if you check and see, is it going to snow in Buffalo? And Buffalo always whips up on the West Coast teams when they come to play in the blizzard up in Buffalo. And it's kind of nice to know things like that.